She never abandons the man who leads. She abandons the man who dissolves. Let that sentence cut through you like a blade because it explains the very tragedy you've been living. You were not left because you were unkind. You were not abandoned because you lacked devotion. You were erased because you dissolved. You handed over your frame. You became vapor. And nothing binds to vapor. Now you carry a wound, a question that keeps haunting you. Why does she get addicted to the man who never chases yet feels nothing for the man who worships her? You believed worship was the highest form of love. You thought loyalty, patience, and sacrifice were the currency of devotion. You imagined that if you gave her everything, she would give you herself. But reality is merciless. The more you bent, the more she broke you. The more you sacrificed, the faster she replaced you. And now you sit with the ashes alone, rejected, disposable. This video will force you to confront the truth you have avoided your entire life. Because what I am about to reveal is not gentle. It is not comforting. It is not what you want to hear. But it is the only map out of your despair. Today you will face the hidden psychology of female desire. 5 layers, 5 merciless laws that explain why women get addicted to men who lead the frame and why they abandon the men who dissolve into worship. Layer 1, you will see how begging is not love. It is self-eraser. Every time you begged, you announced that you had no law, no weight, no gravity, and emptiness cannot be loved. Layer 2, you will face the frame battle because every relationship is war. Either your frame consumes hers or hers consumes yours. And when you surrendered, you didn't just lose her, you lost yourself. Layer 3, you will discover why leadership imprints deeper than kindness. She does not remember the man who follows her. She remembers the man who commands her nervous system. Layer 4, you will confront the power of contrast. Desire cannot exist without polarity. Attraction is fire and fire only burns when there is friction. You smoothed your edges and you killed the flame. And finally, layer 5, the law that chains her addiction beyond choice, where attraction stops being preference and becomes neurological programming. Where she no longer decides to stay, she orbits you because she cannot escape. This is the secret you were never taught. The secret that rewrites everything you thought you knew about love. The moment you see it, you will understand why nice guys are abandoned, why bad boys are remembered, and why the man who leads becomes an axis around which her entire reality spins. But I must warn you, if you skip the 5th layer, if you close this video before the end, you will remain disposable. You will walk back into your relationships as the same man who was erased before. So stay until the end because the difference between being replaced and being unforgettable, between being abandoned and being addictive, lies in the laws I will reveal. This is not about tricks. This is not about games. This is about the architecture of human desire. The brutal psychology that governs why women get addicted to men who lead and why they abandon men who dissolve. The truth is merciless, but the truth will set you free. So listen carefully. What you hear next may burn, but it is the fire you need. Part 1, The Death of Begging. Every time you beg, you erase yourself. You thought begging was proof of love. You convinced yourself it showed devotion, patience, loyalty. You told yourself women would admire your persistence, respect your sacrifice, and reward your tears. But each time you begged, you did not grow closer. You disappeared. Because begging does not reveal love. Begging exposes emptiness. When you beg, you announce a terrible confession. I have no weight. I have no law. I have no value unless you give it to me. And the moment you declare that, you are no longer a man, only a shadow clinging to her mercy. This is why she could not love you. Not because you were too kind, not because you lacked passion, but because in her eyes, you erased yourself. You dissolved your edges, your boundaries, your dignity. You transformed into air. And no woman can fall in love with air. Think about the humiliation you felt. The silence after your desperate messages. The coldness in her eyes as you tried to convince her to stay. The way she recoiled, not because she hated you, but because you had vanished. You were there physically, but psychologically you were gone. Carl Jung once spoke of the shadow self, the part of man he refuses to confront. Your shadow is not your darkness. Your shadow is your eraser. It is the part of you that surrendered your frame, that collapsed into the fantasy that sacrifice would buy love. You did not face your shadow. You became it. And the truth is merciless. Every time you begged, you killed attraction. Not once, not twice, every time. Because attraction lives only where there is law, gravity, and resistance. Begging is the opposite of resistance. Begging is surrender. And surrender makes you invisible. Ask yourself, when has a woman ever been addicted to the man who kneels? When has she ever been obsessed with the man who places her on a throne and himself at her feet? Never. She may enjoy the attention. She may exploit the devotion, but she never respects it. And without respect, there is no attraction. Nietzsche wrote of the will to power, the drive that animates life itself. Begging is the denial of that will. It is the announcement that your power has been handed away, that your center no longer belongs to you. And when you give away your will, you are no longer alive in her eyes. You are already dead. This is why your relationships ended in silence. Why she drifted toward the man who gave her no pedestal. Why she forgot you while you still obsess over her. She was not cruel. She was responding to law. She could not orbit emptiness. Feel the sting of this truth. Let the humiliation burn, because unless you face it, you will repeat it. You will kneel again. You will erase yourself again, and you will be abandoned again. Stop lying to yourself. Begging is not noble. Begging is not devotion. Begging is not proof of love. Begging is proof of self-eraser. And if you continue, you will not only lose women, you will lose yourself. Stop erasing yourself. Now, if begging is death, what is the alternative? How does a man avoid eraser and become unforgettable? The answer lies in the war of frames, because every relationship is not harmony. It is battle, and only one frame survives. Let us move to Part 2, the frame battle. Part 2, the frame battle. Every relationship is war of frames. Only one survives. You have been told love is harmony. That relationships are built on compromise, equality, and balance. But the truth is merciless. Every relationship is a clash of frames, a collision of realities, a silent war over whose world becomes dominant. If you do not hold your frame, hers will absorb you. A frame is not a trick. It is not a mask. A frame is the law of your reality, the way you see the world, the rhythm you impose, the weight you carry. To lead the frame means to command the terms of existence between you and her. To lose the frame means to dissolve into hers, to become a piece of furniture in her universe. You have lived this war and lost it. Think back. At first you had convictions, standards, a center. But slowly she tested you with words, with moods, with silence. And each time, instead of standing, you bent. Instead of holding, you surrendered. You told yourself you were being patient. You told yourself you were being kind. But what she saw was erosion. What she felt was the collapse of your world into hers. And in that collapse, you disappeared. The pain of losing a frame is not just losing her respect. It is losing your own identity. You stopped being the axis. You became an accessory. You no longer walked as a man with his own law. You floated as an ornament in her domain. Do you understand why she replaced you? It was not because you lacked love. It was because you lacked gravity. Your frame dissolved, and with it her desire. Freud spoke of the ego as the center that mediates reality. When you surrendered your frame, you amputated your ego. You became an object in her projection. You thought this would bring closeness, but it only created contempt. Machiavelli wrote that power is never shared. It is taken, held, and enforced. Relationships obey the same law. Two frames cannot coexist equally. One must bend. One must yield. One must dominate. When you fail to hold your frame, she does not respect you for your flexibility. She punishes you for your weakness. She may keep you for utility, for comfort, for convenience, but never for desire. And without desire, you are already disposable. Feel the sting of this truth. Remember the hollow feeling when she stopped listening to you. Recall the numbness when her decisions replaced yours. Relive the humiliation of realizing you were no longer a man in her eyes, but a dependent child orbiting her moods. That was the death of your frame. That was the moment you ceased to exist. Every relationship is a battlefield, but the war is silent, psychological, unspoken. Each look, each silence, each decision is a test. She is not testing your kindness. She is testing your strength. And if you fail, she cannot follow you. Because no woman can follow a man who follows her. Hold your frame or lose everything. Because when you collapse, she is forced to lead. And when she leads, she resents you. Not because she hates leadership, but because she craves a man whose gravity bends her reality, not one who orbits hers. This is the brutal psychology of desire. Women do not become addicted to the man who surrenders. They become addicted to the man whose frame is immovable. And that is why leadership becomes the deepest imprint. She does not remember the man who compromises, she remembers the man who commands. Now let us move to Part 3, Leadership as Imprint. Part 3, Leadership as Imprint. She doesn't remember kindness. She remembers command. This is the truth you have avoided. You believed women would never forget your patience, your loyalty, your sacrifices. You thought the hours spent listening, the gifts you offered, the tears you shed would carve your name into her memory. But her nervous system does not archive kindness. It archives command. Understand this. The female brain is not wired to be imprinted by worship. It is wired to be imprinted by leadership. Attraction is not charity. It is neurological. When a man takes command, when he sets the rhythm, when he leads with weight and certainty, her body responds before her mind can argue. Think back. The men she cannot forget were not the ones who adored her endlessly. They were the ones who led, the ones who made decisions without asking for permission, the ones who created contrast, who stood as an immovable axis, who gave her reality a pulse she could not escape. Kindness is forgettable. Leadership is unforgettable. Why? Because kindness alone does not shape her world. It bends around her. But leadership cuts into her nervous system. It becomes rhythm. It becomes structure. It becomes the silent law she cannot resist. Nietzsche spoke of the Übermensch, the man who does not bend to external approval but creates values and laws of his own. This is leadership in relationships. To live from your own axis, to walk with your own rhythm, to impose gravity instead of asking for permission. The moment you do this, you are no longer optional. You are unforgettable. And you have felt the opposite. You have lived as the man who followed. You adjusted your pace to her moods. You asked before deciding. You waited for her signals before acting. And what happened? She forgot. She dismissed you. She replaced you because you left no imprint. Leadership imprints because it creates contrast in her nervous system. It anchors her. Without it, she floats. And a floating woman does not respect the man who floats with her. She craves the man who grounds her. Freud explained the psyche as layers of impulse, memory, and unconscious drive. Leadership bypasses her logic and strikes directly at the unconscious. She may argue with your words. She may resist your decisions. But her body cannot forget the weight of command. That is why the man who leads becomes obsession, while the man who follows is erased. She does not lie awake remembering the man who texted good morning every day. She lies awake haunted by the man who set the tempo, who challenged her, who bent her world into his orbit. You must feel the sting of this. Because you spent years believing devotion was enough. But devotion without command is invisible. She does not fall in love with the man who collapses into her. She falls in love with the man who pulls her into him. Lead, don't follow. This is the law you must accept. Kindness without leadership kills attraction. Leadership without kindness still imprints. And if you can unify both, you do not simply attract her. You engrave yourself into her nervous system. This is why leadership is not a choice. It is the essence of masculine value in relationships. Without it, you dissolve. With it, you bind. And yet, leadership alone is not enough. Because attraction does not live in stability. It lives in tension. To hold her desire, you must embody contrast. Light against shadow, order against chaos, fire against stillness. Now, let us move to Part 4, the power of contrast. Part 4, the power of contrast. Light only exists because of shadow. Desire only lives inside contrast. Attraction is not born in safety. It is born in tension. It is the clash between presence and absence, command and surrender, light and dark. Without contrast, there is no desire. Without edges, there is nothing to hold. But you spent your life erasing your edges. You thought being agreeable would make you lovable. You thought being predictable would make you trustworthy. You thought smoothing yourself into a harmless surface would make you irresistible. But in truth, you killed attraction. You became safe. And safety is the grave of desire. A man without contrast is not a man. He is background noise. He is wallpaper. He is forgettable. Think of the times you tried to be her perfect choice. You never argued. You never contradicted. You never disrupted. You believed compliance was respect. That harmony was strength. But what she saw was not strength. She saw absence. She saw a man with no polarity, no fire, no danger. And in that absence, her desire evaporated. Women do not fall in love with neutrality. They fall in love with contrast, with the man who is gentle yet immovable, kind yet ruthless, present yet untouchable. They crave the polarity of a man who can both shelter and confront, both comfort and challenge. Schopenhauer wrote that life itself is tension between will and representation. Desire mirrors this law. Without opposition, existence collapses into nothingness. Without contrast, you collapse into boredom. And boredom is the death of attraction. Feel this truth. She did not replace you because you were cruel. She replaced you because you were flat. You thought she wanted safety. But what she truly wanted was aliveness. And aliveness only breathes where there is edge. You remember the humiliation. The moment she looked at you as though you were invisible. The moment she drifted toward the man who was unpredictable, the man with contrast, the man who embodied both danger and desire. You called him reckless. You called him irresponsible. But she called him unforgettable. And you, despite your devotion, were erased. Why? Because desire is not about comfort. Desire is about intensity. Comfort makes her rest. Contrast makes her crave. She does not orbit safety. She orbits fire. When you erase your edges, you erase your polarity. You make yourself soft, smooth, harmless. And harmless men do not bind women. They bore them. They become tools to be used, not forces to be desired. Stop smoothing your edges. You are not meant to be harmless. You are meant to be whole. That means embracing every polarity inside you. Strength and tenderness, command and silence, light and shadow. The man who integrates these contrasts becomes magnetic. The man who suppresses them becomes disposable. Contrast is the law of attraction. It is why fire burns, why shadows make light beautiful, why tension makes release powerful. A woman does not crave the man who blends into her world. She craves the man who stands in sharp relief against it. But contrast alone is still incomplete. Because desire is not only fire, it is binding. The deepest addiction is not preference. It is programming. At the final level, attraction is no longer a choice. It becomes law. And that brings us to the ultimate revelation, the secret you cannot afford to miss. Now, let us move to Part 5, the binding law. Part 5, the binding law. She doesn't choose addiction. Addiction chooses her. This is the final law. The deepest truth you have resisted. Attraction at its highest level is not preference. It is not choice. It is compulsion. It is programming. When you hold your frame, when you live with gravity, boundaries, and weight, you stop being an option. You become law. And law does not negotiate. Law does not ask permission. Law binds. Understand this. A woman cannot escape the man who embodies law. Her nervous system does not decide to crave him. It is compelled. She may argue with her logic. She may protest with her words. She may resist with her pride. But beneath all that, her body obeys because biology bends to gravity. Think of it this way. Every man she has forgotten was the man who dissolved. He left no law. He left no weight. He vanished like smoke. But the man she cannot forget, the man she dreams of even years later, is the one whose presence became a structure inside her nervous system. He set the rhythm. He became the axis around which her emotions, her desire, her very sense of self revolved. That is the binding law. You mistook love for kindness. You mistook loyalty for sacrifice. You mistook patience for devotion. But none of those things bind. Only law binds. Only gravity chains her desire to you beyond her will, beyond her choices. Freud spoke of the unconscious as a reservoir of compulsion. The binding law bypasses reason and strikes there. It imprints itself so deeply that she cannot untangle her craving even if she wants to. This is why women stay addicted to men who lead and why they abandon men who chase. You have felt the opposite. You have begged. You have worshipped. You have dissolved. And she walked away without hesitation. She did not even look back because you gave her freedom from gravity. You released her from orbit. And without orbit, there is no addiction. But imagine the reverse. Imagine carrying weight so undeniable, edges so unshakable, command so absolute that she cannot escape even if she tries. She does not choose to stay. She is bound. She does not decide to crave. She is compelled. This is not cruelty. This is not manipulation. This is law. The same law that keeps the earth in orbit around the sun. The same law that pulls tides to the moon. Gravity does not ask. It commands and everything obeys. Stop chasing. Start binding. Because the man who chases becomes invisible. But the man who binds becomes unforgettable. She does not remember the one who begged. She remembers the one who commanded. She remembers the one who burned his rhythm into her nervous system, who turned attraction from preference into compulsion. This is why addiction is not chance. It is structure. It is law. And you can embody it only when you refuse to dissolve. When you stop erasing yourself, when you stand as axis instead of orbit. Do not mistake this for arrogance. This is necessity. Because if you fail to embody law, you will be abandoned again. Not because women are cruel, but because nature is merciless and nature does not respect the man who dissolves. Hold your frame. Carry your weight. Live as law. Then addiction is no longer hers to choose. Addiction chooses her. And now you are ready for the final revelation. The emotional payoff that seals everything you have heard. Let us move to the conclusion. You were never abandoned because you were too kind. You were abandoned because you carried no frame. That is the wound you must finally face. For years, you told yourself a softer story. You said women despised kindness. You said they punished devotion. You said they betrayed patience. But the truth is sharper. They abandoned you because you dissolved. You erased yourself. You became weightless and nothing orbits emptiness. The moment you hold your frame, everything changes. She no longer stays out of preference. She no longer stays out of calculation. She no longer stays out of convenience. She stays because she cannot escape. Because your presence becomes gravity. Because your boundaries become walls. Because your law becomes architecture. And in that architecture, she orbits. Not because she chooses, but because she is compelled. Not because she reasons, but because her nervous system has been imprinted. Attraction is not her decision. It is her compulsion. This is the emotional payoff you have been running from. You wanted to believe love was kindness. You wanted to believe patience would buy loyalty. You wanted to believe sacrifice would secure permanence. But what you called love was collapse. What you called patience was eraser. What you called sacrifice was weakness. Now you see the truth. The man who dissolves becomes disposable. The man who holds frame becomes unforgettable. Let this cut through you because without this shift you will repeat the same fate. Erased, abandoned, forgotten. But with this shift, you become the axis. You become the law. You become the man she cannot leave. Not because she chooses to stay, but because she has no choice. This is not cruelty. This is not manipulation. This is nature. Gravity does not beg. Gravity does not plead. Gravity does not compromise. It simply is. And everything obeys. So you must decide. Will you continue dissolving or will you finally hold your frame? Will you beg to be remembered or will you become unforgettable? Will you remain disposable or will you embody law? If you are done being disposable, if you are finished being erased, then your next step is clear. Watch the next video, Frame Killers, 7 Habits That Make Men Powerless. There you will see the invisible cracks that destroy everything you try to build, the subtle self-betrayals that collapse your frame from within. If you miss it, you will repeat them. If you face it, you will eliminate them forever. Do not turn away now because this is the edge between life and death in your relationships. Either you build the law or you vanish. Either you command orbit or you disappear into her shadow. Attraction is not chance. It is law. Build it or disappear.